With some athletes, you can pretty much define them by their numbers. The stats just tell the story of their greatness. But for others, well, the numbers are just the beginning of a much bigger, more complex, and way more fascinating story. Today, we're diving into the legacy of a true revolutionary, Martina Navratilova. So just look at this number for a second, 167. That is the open-era record for women's singles titles. It's more than any other player, man or woman. I mean, it's just a staggering testament to her sustained excellence. Of course not. Not even close. Because with Martina Navratilova, the jaw-dropping statistics are really only one chapter in a life that was defined by defiance, by transformation, and by using her voice far, far beyond the tennis court. All right, so to really understand the champion, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, to this immense personal risk she took long before she ever became a household name. This timeline really shows you her meteoric rise. She was a total prodigy, born in communist Czechoslovakia, and by the time she was in her mid-teens, she was already the best player in her entire country. But, as her talent started taking her to tournaments all over the world, she got a taste of a kind of freedom she just didn't have back home. I mean, can you even imagine that? At just 18 years old, right after a tough loss in a huge tournament, she makes the decision to defect. And the consequences were immediate. She was stripped of her Czechoslovakian citizenship, completely cut off from her family, and left to build a new life totally on her own in a new country. The courage that took it's immense. And build a new life, she absolutely did. But she didn't just win, she fundamentally changed the sport itself. This next part of her career, well, it saw her establish one of the most dominant reigns in the history of any sport. See, her dominance wasn't just about raw talent. It was about a revolutionary approach to the entire game. She famously started working with coach Nancy Lieberman, who brought a basketball player's training style to tennis. This focus on serious fitness and strength training created this absolute powerhouse athlete who brought a whole new level of aggressive all-court play that basically forced every other player to adapt. She didn't just play the game, she physically reinvented what it meant to be a champion. And this new, powerful style created the perfect foil for her greatest rival, Chris Evert. I mean, their matches were a clash of titans, this beautiful contrast in styles. You had Evert, the steady, almost metronomic force from the baseline, and then Navratilova, who was all-out attack, constantly rushing the net. Their rivalry truly defined women's tennis for an entire decade. And get this, while they played 80 times in total, with Martina holding a slight 43-37 edge, this chart right here tells the most crucial story. When the stakes were at their absolute highest, in the finals of Grand Slams, Navratilova had a clear, decisive advantage, winning 10 of their 14 meetings. At her peak, she was simply untouchable. This number, 74, that was her record-breaking winning streak back in 1984. To this day, it is the longest winning streak for any professional player ever. And the year before that, in 1983, she put together this mind-boggling season record, 86 wins and just a single loss. That is the highest single-season winning percentage of the entire professional era. Just think about that for a second. One loss in a whole year. This quote from the legendary tennis journalist Bud Collins just brilliantly sums up how far ahead she was. He said this after she completely dismantled Evert in the 1984 French Open final. She wasn't just beating her rivals anymore, she was in a class all by herself. But as unbelievably dominant as she was on the court, her impact didn't stop at the baseline. She was just as pioneering and just as outspoken in her public life. We really have to put this in context. This was 1981. It was an incredibly brave act for any public figure, let alone one of the most famous athletes in the entire world. It actually wasn't planned. An article was published before she was ready, but she didn't hide. She owned it. And in doing so, she became this powerful and incredibly visible icon for gay rights. And her activism was never just about one issue. Having fled a totalitarian regime herself, she was a fierce critic of communism. She consistently used her platform to support so many causes, from animal rights to LGBTQ equality, always speaking out on the issues she believed in. Now, in more recent years, she has become a central figure in one of the most complex and contentious debates in all of sports. She has argued that transgender women who have gone through male puberty have a physical advantage that creates an unfair playing field in women's sports.
This stance has generated a lot of controversy. The advocacy group Athlete Ally actually removed her from their board, and they called her comments transphobic. Navratilova did later apologize for some of her language, specifically using the word cheating, and has since consistently called for more research and for a dialogue based on science to find a fair solution. She even co-founded a working group to try and address the issue.
So when you start to put all of this together, the defection, the dominance, the activism, the controversy, you begin to see the shape of an incredibly complex and truly enduring legacy. Okay, let's just start with her on-court completeness. She is one of only 3 women in history to achieve what's called the career boxed set. That means winning all 4 majors in singles, women's doubles, and mixed doubles. And that 31 women's doubles titles, that's an all-time record. And her longevity was just astounding. We're talking decades after she first turned pro, and she was still competing at the absolute highest level. Her very last major title came at the 2006 US Open, almost 32 years after her first one. She won a Grand Slam title a month before she turned 50. It's just unbelievable. And really, what better way to summarize her on-court legacy than this quote from another legend, Billie Jean King? When you consider her complete mastery across every single discipline of the sport, it's an argument that's very, very hard to refute.
Which brings us right back to where we started. She was a record-breaking athlete who revolutionized her sport. An activist who broke barriers and spoke her mind, for better or worse. A pioneer who risked everything for freedom. So, how do you define a legacy that complex? Maybe you don't. Maybe you just study it and appreciate the immense, undeniable impact one person can have.